Election day is finally almost here. Already, about 3.5 million voters have voted early or by absentee, and that number will soar even higher tomorrow with the last day of early voting. Then on election day, we could have 2 million more voters and get to a total turnout of 6 million, which would be more than has ever been seen in Georgia. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of our Facebook chat on elections. I'm pleased to be joined by two of my great colleagues, Tia Mitchell and James Salzer. Tia is our Washington correspondent. She covers everything national politics from the president to the Senate races and congressional races. And James Salzer has been covering Georgia government for a long time. He knows everything about budget, taxes, and the state house. And we have lots of interesting and close races coming up really across the state, and some of them have national implications. Thank you for joining us again for this weekly Facebook chat. I hope everybody is ready for a busy and interesting election day. We don't know what's going to happen, but one thing we do know is there are going to be a lot of people participating, as they have already. They will also on Tuesday. So I look forward to it, and I hope you are too. And I just wanted to talk about turnout for a minute. As I said, 6 million voters we could reach, which is really amazing. If you look at 2016, we had 4.1 million voters. So it's like a 50% increase over the last 4 years. And that shows just how enthusiastic and interested voters are about this election. I've never seen voter participation at this level. You know, if you think about it, if we get to 6 million voters and we have 7.6 million total, that's approaching 80% turnout. That would be truly incredible if we got to that level of participation in Georgia. And by the time we get to Tuesday, there are still going to be a sizable number left to vote at their neighborhood polling places. So I don't think we can expect that just because so many people have voted already that they won't show up on Tuesday. People like voting on election day. What we always see in elections is if people vote early, that also means even more people will vote on election day. It won't be even more people this year because we are going to have a sizable portion that have already done the early voting or absentee voting. But still, we're talking maybe 2 million on Tuesday, which is significant. That's about the same as we did in 2016, and all the increase has been in the early and absentee voters. So just a little piece of advice: if you do vote on Tuesday, you might not want to show up right at 7 o'clock when polls open. That's when the lines are most likely to build up. You see this every year, that voters want to be the first in line. But when you do that, you might be guaranteeing yourself a little bit of a wait. The slower times might be late morning or early afternoon, and then the other busy time is usually 5 to 7 p.m. That's when a lot of voters stack up and when they're coming home from work and completing their day. So you might want to hit the down times, minimize your wait, and also make the lines a little bit shorter for everybody else. And then after that, we will have a ton of votes pour in after polls close. We usually don't get votes in right away because county election officials have to close down the polls, go through the whole process of counting them and reporting to them to the state. But after 8 o'clock, we should start to see results show up in all of our major races. And election officials say because we're able to count absentee ballots early this year under a state election board rule, not count absentee ballots early, open and scan absentee ballots early, and then count them on election night, we will get a lot of those absentee ballots recorded and tallied in what you see in the official results, unofficial results that come in on the Secretary of State's website. So we will have a good idea of how the races are going, but there will still be a lot of last minute absentee ballots arriving on that Monday or Tuesday, and those might not be counted until Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So in close races, we might not know which way it's going to go until all votes are counted. But if it's not close, we might know some outcomes late on Tuesday night, and we'll just have to see how that goes. And I'd like to turn it over to Tia Mitchell. She can tell us a little bit about the biggest races that you're watching. I think we all know about President, but talk a little bit about what you're watching for in all of our huge races: President, 2 Senate races, and some House races that are pretty interesting too.
Yeah, we're busy here in Georgia. President Trump is campaigning here probably, one last time before Tuesday. He'll be in Rome on Sunday for what we expect will be a huge rally up in Northwest Georgia. And so all the polls are showing that, it's close between President Trump and Vice President Biden. And if Vice President Biden manages to carry Georgia, that will be the first time since Bill Clinton. But he only carried Georgia once, right?
In 92, that's
in
right.
In 92. Yeah. He didn't carry Georgia in 96. Fun fact.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, of course, Georgia is a battleground, so there's a lot of attention on Georgia for the presidential race. Then we have the 2 Senate races. So we've got Ossoff and Perdue. The most recent thing with Ossoff and Perdue is they had a televised debate last night, Wednesday night. Was that down in Savannah? I think it was. And John Ossoff got kind of a zinger in there, and he's kind of gone viral. And so that's, I'm sure you guys know, because the TV ads are like, all the candidates are on TV, but especially Ossoff and Perdue, and that shows how much money is in that race. Because there is a third-party candidate, a libertarian candidate, there is a chance that race goes to a runoff in January. Then we have the other Senate race, the Loeffler seat, the special election, and we know with so many candidates in that race, that one we're pretty much guaranteed for a runoff. So there's a chance both Senate races in Georgia go to a runoff, which means, ladies and gentlemen, look forward to those ads until January. And so
make it stop.
Right, I know. And it's funny, so I live in the DC area. I'm just down here to help cover elections, but through the magic of streaming cable, my channels are set to Atlanta. So even though I live in DC, I get all the ads too, because I want to kind of see. Right. So it's been interesting to see some of those ads even on my TV, and it's a lot. And so we have our 2 Senate races. Again, there's a chance both go to a runoff, but we've got Ossoff and Perdue. We've got Loeffler and Collins trying to battle it out to see who goes up against who we expect to be the Democrat, Raphael Warnock. And so Loeffler and Collins are each trying to outright, out-Trump, out-conservative each other. And then we have 14 congressional seats. All of them are contested. Most of them are not competitive, which means the incumbent, for the most part, is going to win. In the open seats, 14, Marjorie Taylor Greene has no opponent. In District 9, it's an open seat. Andrew Clyde's a Republican, very likely to win against the Democrat there. But, so our 2 biggest races to watch. District 6, which is Lucy McBath versus Karen Handel, the big rematch. And I just left Karen Handel. She was campaigning with Doug Collins this morning. And she's been, of course, doing a lot of in-person voting. Republicans, we know, are more likely than Democrats to be doing more in-person events. In the 6th district race, it's really night and day. Lucy McBath has been almost completely virtual, whereas Karen Handel is knocking on doors and campaigning again with other Republicans. And she says her data is showing that right now in District 6, Republicans have the edge in the number of votes cast. That's what she told me this morning. But Lucy McBath is the incumbent. She beat Karen Handel 2 years ago. All the prognosticators think that Lucy McBath kind of is in the driver's seat because she is the incumbent and because that district, which is like North DeKalb, North Fulton County, East Cobb, is more Democratic even than it was 2 years ago. And then I think even more interested is the 7th congressional race. That's Carolyn Bordeaux. She ran against Rob Woodall 2 years ago. Came within less than 500 votes, almost unseated an incumbent. Rob Woodall said, I'm out, not trying that again. And now we've got Karen Bordeaux against Rich McCormick, who's a newcomer. He's a doctor, a Marine, and depending on whether you agree or not, he says he is a Morehouse man because he went to the Morehouse School of Medicine. The Morehouse College people are taking some umbrage with that. But so that's again an open seat, a true toss-up in Georgia, a true contest between two, people who do not have previous elected experience. So we're going to be, that seat is most of Gwinnett and a little bit of Forsyth County. So that is definitely a race to watch. Again, the prognosticators say Bordeaux has the edge, but it's expected to be close.
Yeah, it's amazing that all of our top 5 races, president, 2 Senate races, and those 2 House races you just mentioned, are all very close. While we might get a lot of results on election night, I think those ones that we want to know the results about, I don't know if we'll be able to see who's winning even at midnight or the early morning hours Wednesday.
Absolutely. It took a while. It took a week or two for the Bordeaux and Woodall race 2 years ago to officially be called, right? Because it was so close. There was all this looking at the absentee ballots and things like that. Yeah, the hanging. As someone who lived in Florida during Bush v. Gore, I was in college then, but it was still very interesting. But yeah, so it could take a while. Again, if it's close and it comes down to counting all those absentee / mail-in ballots, and then if it comes to questioning, as 2 years ago, it wasn't just about counting the ballots, it was about which ballots should be counted. And that gets way into the weeds, and that's not a quick process.
James, tell us about the General Assembly. There's a lot of excitement about these suburban House races where it could go one way or the other. We don't know. I believe it's been quite some time since we've had Republican control in both the House and the Senate in Georgia, and Democrats think that there might be changes coming. I'm not so sure if it's coming that quickly. What do you think?
Well, I was here when Democrats, mostly rural, white male Democrats ran the legislature, and then Republicans took over in 2005 in the House, largely because of a redistricting map that was Democrats had tried to gerrymander it to continue had to have control. The judge threw it out, redrew the maps, and as soon as we saw the maps, we were like, oh, this is going to be interesting. So Republicans took over the House in 2005. The Senate in 2003, because they had a couple of 4 party switchers who switched parties after Sonny Perdue won the governor's race that year. So yeah, they've been in charge. I've been hearing for 10 years that the comeback story of the Democratic Party, that they were going to come back and take all these seats. Well, lo and behold, in 2018 they did. They won, I think, 11 House seats and 2 Senate seats. Still got a ways to go. But if there were to be a blue wave, it would be pretty spectacular. And the numbers make it very hard. It may be close, but they're going to have to pick up a lot of seats. I'm just skeptical that they pick up that many seats in one election. But as you're talking about these congressional races being close, the biggest deal about this is that if Republicans do maintain the House and the Senate next year, they will be able to draw district lines so that Lucy McBath, if she wins by 1,000 votes, they'll find some Republican voters further north to stick in there, and that seat could flip. The same with the Gwinnett seat. The Gwinnett demographics would tell you there's no way that that seat is going to be Democratic for a long time. That's what it would tell you. But they could throw in part of Bartow County or Hall County or some other county, and so if they do retain that, 2021 is going to be incredibly significant for the next decade. How those lines are drawn, and so that's why I think there's a lot of you use the word excitement, but there's a lot, and there's just an amazing amount of money. House Minority Leader Bob Trammell has been targeted by a national Republican group. He is the last white male Democrat in the House, and
Wow.
He, he's been the leader of the Democrats since I guess since Stacey Abrams gave up the job to run for governor, and that I think I'd have to go back and look, but at least in my 30 years, it's the most expensive House race that I can remember. There's a national Republican group that has put like over $1 million into that race, which is absurd for a what do they make, $17,542 a year job, and it's also
represent how many people,
and
right?
yeah, and it's also it's a very it's not this, we're not talking about, no offense to Buckhead, we're not talking about Buckhead here, we're talking about a nice rural area, small town area,
right?
Luthersville. I always or as I say sometimes Tremblesville, but yeah, it's like to spend a couple $1 million on that race, during a coronavirus pandemic, all the other things going on in the world, just seems like a silly amount of money. But the House Speaker David Ralston and Jeff Duncan in the Senate have just committed that they're going to put as much money as they can into those races, and it's it's money coming from the usual state house sources that back who's ever in charge.
And I just want to clarify, he's the last white Democrat from what? The rural area?
Areas.
From rural
Yeah,
areas.
yeah. No, I mean there's
some from Metro
Atlanta,
yeah.
Metro Atlanta. I think one of the more interesting things about if there were either chamber went to the Democrats, is it would be interesting to see if there is a leadership shift in that the leadership is not all from outside of Atlanta. I mean, not all, but I mean, a vast majority, and this was true when the Democrats were in charge, the vast majority of people who ran things, who really made the big decisions, have not been Atlantans. I mean, or even suburbanites. Although that's changed somewhat. But it used to be that you had to be from at least 50 miles away from the state capital to have any kind of major the major committees. By and large, it's not universal, but by and large. So it will be interesting if the Democrats did take over, if you saw a different kind of priorities almost, because if you're from Kirkwood or Oakhurst, where I'm from, you have a different priority probably than somebody from Hira.
Good. Let's get into some audience questions. One, do you think the amount of people early voting give Biden a lead in Georgia? I'll start out with that. We do have a ton of early voters. We have a ton of new voters, and generally speaking, high turnout tends to favor Democrats, according to the people who track this kind of thing, the political scientists and the number crunchers. So we do have that trend. On the other hand, I always think back to the first John Ossoff versus Karen Handel race in 2017, where turnout was really good and there so much money poured in, and it wasn't just one side. You saw anytime there was a new ad or a new movement on the Democratic side, there was an equal response on the Republican side, and ultimately Karen Handel did win that race. So I think it's really hard to predict where we're going based on early voting, but we can tell that there is a high level of enthusiasm. I think there is a little bit of that applying to both sides, but generally speaking, I think high turnout does give some percentage points or fractions of a percentage point edge to the Democratic candidate. And then we get to election day. The opposite trend is that whatever happens in early voting, you have some research that say Democrats are more likely to be late voters, and you have other research that shows Republicans love voting on election day itself. So I don't know who to believe, who's going to show up.
I was going to say, plus some of those really high turnout areas so far have been in North Georgia districts that are not favorable to Democrats. Mm-hmm. So that's what makes it difficult to, it'd be one thing if you could say, well, Gwinnett County or DeKalb County have really strong turnout, but Forsyth County hasn't, or where I think it was Dawson County is like already eclipsed what they voted in 2016. So, and those counties aren't going Democrat. At least Dawson County's not.
Yeah, and Greene County is number one turnout in the state.
Yep.
That's been as a proportion of the registered voters. It's
Yeah.
pretty interesting to see. And follow up on that, I know I hear every 2 years when there's an election, everybody says, is this the year that Georgia turns into a purple state? And every year it's not. We still have universal Republican control of every statewide office. Do you think that we're getting closer to the point where Democrats could win?
Yeah, 2018 showed that. I mean, look at how close those races are. Now there was, an amazing amount of enthusiasm for both parties at the top of the ticket, like there is this time with Biden and President Trump. With Stacey Abrams and with Brian Kemp, there was, it was very similar. And you look at all those statewide races, and the races where there really wasn't a lot going on in terms of media attention, and the candidates were running, but it wasn't something that was getting a huge amount of attention and didn't have a lot of money in. Some of the down ballot races, some of those kind of went, some of those were close too. So that kind of tells you that likely I'm the same way. I've been hearing it for much longer than you have at the Capitol, that's going to happen. But the numbers and the demographics are changing. We're becoming a more diverse society. So I just think it's going to happen.
I just think Georgia needs to slow down on calling itself purple until some Democrats actually win statewide.
Yeah, you got to win.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm and I'm not saying, I'm talking you always hear Georgia's a purple state. It's like, nah, not yet. I get that Georgia's a battleground. It's on the radar.
Yep.
Democrats have gotten close. Stacey Abrams created the blueprint. But until a Democrat wins statewide, Georgia is not purple yet.
Need a W.
They need a W.
That's right. We have a good question here. How long do you think it will take to have a definitive answer on who has won the election? I think they're talking about the presidential election.
Yeah.
I think that personally, as a reporter, I'm going to be very, very careful. I don't want to be in a position of trying to predict or say that a margin is insurmountable for either candidate until we're really, really sure.
I think even if it's a Biden route, it'll take until the next day to know for sure. I think if it's
nationally or
nationally,
oh, okay.
I think if it's a Biden route and Biden, gets enough electoral college votes, we won't know for sure until the next day. And of course it won't be final, but I think if it's a Biden route, it could be pretty clear. The AP could call it by the next day. But if it's close, if it's a Trump win or if it's close, then it could take days, if not weeks.
Right. It depends how close it is and how many absentee ballots arrive on Monday and Tuesday that still need to be counted later in the week. So we'll have to do some math. We'll have to figure out how many absentee ballots are left to be counted and how close the race is. For Georgia, anyway, I would not count on Georgia being settled for president on election night. I don't see much of a possibility of that because Georgia is so close. Nationally, though, I wonder,
if Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Arizona and all these, Florida, if all these states that are battlegrounds, Florida usually is pretty, Bush v. Gore notwithstanding, Florida is usually pretty quick, right? Yeah. So, and again, not necessarily that day because there are so many mail-in ballots and the drop box mail-in ballots that come in those last couple of days may take some time to process in some states. So I don't necessarily think that night, even Trump, most people woke up and learned Trump won. They went to bed thinking something else. So I could see people having to wake up and let some things sort out. But as we know, Joe Biden doesn't need Georgia to win. He's got a path to victory without Georgia.
Right.
Whereas if if Joe Biden wins Georgia, it's hard to see a path for victory for Trump if he can't hold on to if Georgia goes purple.
Right.
You know, so of course we'll see some trends. You know, it's going to be so interesting. I'm excited for it. I'm a little bit scared for it, but I'm excited for it.
I'm watching Florida. You know, Florida is the state that to me seems will tell us a lot. You know, because Florida reports relatively quickly, it's on the East Coast, so it's ahead of the other states. I think Florida might send us some signals.
In North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, North Carolina. I remember in 2016, I remember Florida went for Trump, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and I don't know why people saw that and went. I don't know if they went to bed early or what, but when I saw all those states go for Trump in that early wave, I didn't go to bed thinking Hillary Clinton had won.
I was sitting right over here, and we were all watching, the results. And when those Midwest states went, I was like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
this is probably Trump going to win.
Yeah.
Trump.
I want to answer another audience question. Someone voted early, and then they checked their status of their ballot on the My Voter page, which is a great resource. It's the state's website where you can check your voter registration information, view sample ballots, and view your absentee ballot status. It's www.mvp.sos.ga.gov. I said that quickly. Just search for Georgia My Voter page if you want to see it. And the question is, this person clicked on their absentee ballot status and it showed that they voted, even though they didn't vote absentee. They voted early in person. And the answer to that question is yes, early in-person votes are considered a form of absentee voting because you are voting in advance of Election Day. You vote early in person on the same election equipment that you do on Election Day, but it is considered a form of absentee voting, and that's why it shows up on the My Voter page. So it doesn't mean you've returned an absentee ballot, it just means that you participated in early voting. So that's the answer to that question.
And the point is, you wanted to say yes.
Yes, yes.
If you voted.
Right. And also, I also hear from a lot of people who have voted early in person and their information hasn't shown up on the My Voter page yet as having voted. For those people, you can feel safe knowing that if you inserted your paper ballot into the optical scanner, it will count no matter what the My Voter page says. And that's because they don't check. Once you're checked in and you get your paper ballot, there's nothing connecting that paper ballot back to you. So once it's in the scanning machine, it's a vote, it's a ballot. And some counties are a little bit delayed in updating the My Voter page. They're moving through those forms that you fill out when you come to the early voting sites and uploading them to the My Voter page, and sometimes it's taking a few days. But if you insert that ballot, it's in. You voted.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
As the official voter guy. So we've seen so many other trends of how lifestyles have changed in the coronavirus. Do you think that people are going to get familiar or like doing I voted absentee, I don't know, probably a month ago now. Do you think that's a trend that you're going to see more? It used to be 5% or some ridiculous, not ridiculous, but some low number of people voted absentee. Do you think that voting early is bigger in presidential elections? But do you think in 2022, for instance, that we're going to see a higher? It's maybe not as high as it is now, but that it will continue.
I don't know if it'll grow or not, but I think the people who have switched to absentee voting, now they're establishing a habit, We saw 1.1 million absentee voters in the primary, probably getting close to 1.5 million in the general. If we get there, that's 25% of the expected total. So I think we are seeing people embracing absentee voting because of COVID-19. People started using it. I'm one of those people. For me, it's really easy. That's what I like about absentee voting, especially if you get your ballot in early. You don't have to worry about it. So I do think it's habit forming. I do think that people are going to continue to vote, maybe not at the rates as some like extreme vote by mail states, right? But
Right.
I think we'll see the continuation of this kind of 25% absentee vote rate. I don't know if it'll go up or down, but I don't think it's going to
Yeah.
leave. And we do have this website set up where you can apply for an absentee ballot online now. And that I heard today from the Secretary of State's office, it's going to be expanded. That website, you'll be able to request absentee ballots for other elections at once, for example. We'll see exactly how that's implemented and if it happens in that way. But this website will continue to be used to request absentee ballots in the future. And I think it'll continue that way. Unfortunately, I could talk about this stuff on and on, but we have to wrap up. And please stay tuned, audience, because we have so much coverage today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, all through the election and whatever happens. So please keep reading on AJC.com and the print edition of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I promise we'll have coverage of everything that we can possibly handle. We have a large team, not just our politics team, but we have our local government team. We have general assignment reporters. We have breaking news reporters. We have investigative reporters. We have everybody pitching in because this is the biggest election we've seen perhaps in my lifetime, at least in terms of turnout and interest. So thank you for joining us for this week's AJC Facebook chat on Georgia elections. We'll be watching for voting problems, we'll be watching for turnout, and we'll be on top of it. So please keep reading our coverage, and we look forward to your questions and participation in this election.